Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday evening devotional. This is Mike McDaniel, the evangelist of the Central Church of Christ in Caruthersville, Missouri. We're glad you're watching today, and we hope to see many of you at our Bible study at 7 o'clock tonight as we are concluding our study of the book of Zechariah very soon. We're now in the last chapter, chapter 14. We invite you to come out and be with us. Well, tomorrow is Thanksgiving Day. Our nation observes a Thanksgiving Day once a year, and we ought to be grateful that we live in a country which would decide to have a national day of Thanksgiving such as this. Of course, as the people of God, we realize that Thanksgiving is not just a day. It is an attitude that we must possess and express each day of the year. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful. Colossians 3:15. Christians should be giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Ephesians 5:20. A lack of gratitude in one's heart is often outwardly manifested by sin in one's life. Psalm 103 and verse 2 says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits." When we forget our blessings and forget God, the source of our blessings, James 1:17, we are headed for trouble. You recall that of those depicted in Romans 1 who were engaged in grievous sin before God, Paul says of them in Romans 1:21, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. A lack of gratitude was one of the main factors in their apostasy from God. God warned the Israelites concerning this very thing. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 10 through 12, "And it shall be, when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities which thou buildest not, and houses full of good things which thou fillest not, and wells digged which thou diggest not, vineyards and olive trees which thou plantest not. When thou shalt have eaten and be full, then beware lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage." That's Deuteronomy 6:10 through 12. Moses warned the people concerning the danger facing them when they became full, and yet they failed to heed this warning. In fact, many of them forgot the Lord in the wilderness before reaching Canaan. If ever there was a people blessed of God, it was the Israelites of the Old Testament. The psalmist wrote, "Though he hath commanded the clouds from above, and opened the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven, man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full." Psalm 78:23 through 25. It's uncertain as to why manna is called angels' food. Maybe it's called that because it was sent by the ministry of angels. Or maybe because it came down from heaven, which was the dwelling place of angels. Or maybe because it was fit for the angels if they had needed food. I don't know. Brother E.M. Zer wrote, "To us, a popular expression, to use a popular expression, it could be said to have been a breakfast of champions." Of course, that was the slogan that Wheaties used on their box, right? A breakfast of champions. Exodus 16:4 calls the manna bread from heaven. And verse 31 says, and the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. And it was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. The manna came every morning, and the quail rained down from heaven every evening. God provided this food for them during the 40 years of wilderness wandering. It did not cease until they came to the borders of Canaan. Exodus 16:35. Were they grateful? Numbers 21:5 says, and the people spake out against God and against Moses. Wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. I would encourage you to read the rest of Psalm 78, because showers of blessings were theirs. But they were ungrateful. They continued to rebel against God in spite of their blessings. In Psalm 78, I want to look at verse 17. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. They sinned against God. Verse 22, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation. They did not believe in him. Down in verse 36, nevertheless they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongues. They lied to God. Verse 37, for their heart was not right with him, neither were they steadfast in his covenant. Their heart was not right with him. They didn't keep God's covenant. Verse 40, how oft did they provoke him in the wilderness and grieve him in the desert? They provoked God. They grieved God. Back in verse 37, they remembered him not. And verse 42, they remembered not his hand. And then also in verse 42, they remembered not what God had done for them. Now, these people were eating angels' food, and they were living like the devil. They continued to rebel against God in spite of God's bountiful blessings unto them. How could a people be so disobedient, so rebellious, so ungrateful as this? We ask the question, are we doing better than they? Is it not the case that the reason many fail to serve the Lord is rooted in a lack of thanksgiving? They had forgotten the God who is the source of their blessings. Giving thanks to God will help us live right for God. Immediately after the warning of Deuteronomy 6:11-12, we have this admonition. In verse 13, thou shalt fear the Lord thy God and serve him, and shall swear by his name. Consider the source of our blessings. And considering the sufficiency of our blessings, verse 11, ought to cause us to render service in view of our blessings. This Thanksgiving, let us remember that for which the manna or angel's food is typical. Jesus said that the manna was not the true bread from heaven, but only a type of it. John 6:32-33. The true bread from heaven is Christ. John 6:35-36, and Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. He that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I say unto you, that ye also have seen me, and believe not. How thankful we should be for the coming of the bread of life from heaven above. And while many continue to believe not, may we be encouraged to live lives of gratitude unto God. That's our devotional for today. Thanks so much for listening to our Wednesday evening devotional. And until next time, have a good day and a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow.